Hi everyone, welcome to Woolen Spinning Radio. My name is Rachel and this is episode 53. It is Thursday, January 26, 2017, and thank you so much for joining me in this place. This is a hand spinning podcast about everything hand spun and making hand spun yarn and creating everything with our hand spun. I want to thank you for joining me if you're a returning viewer and for continuing on with the show. And if you're a new viewer, thank you for giving me a shot and for trying out the show. For those who are Patreon subscribers of the show, thank you so much for your ongoing support. You're the ones that keep the show on the air week after week, and you're also the ones that were the impetus to start Woolen Spinning Radio, which is a woolen spinning only audio podcast. So thank you to those who support the show. One thing before we move on with the show today, if you are a workshop subscriber or a Fiber Club subscriber, you will probably have received an email in your inbox about the cancellation of those tiers in the Patreon support campaign. I had said that I would cancel them on or around the 20th of the month, and I have gone ahead and done that. So if you got that email and you would still like to support the show, please consider signing into your Patreon account and adjusting your support for the show, and I really appreciate it. So thank you so much. I have a couple of things to chat about today. You can see one thing I've got back here. It's a finished knit, and I have some hand spun yarn that I finished, and I also have a little bit to chat about color studies, which we've been working away on in the group on Ravelry. If you have not checked out the Ravelry group, please come over and join us. It is Woolen Spinning, and we would love to have you. And please introduce yourself. We've had a few people recently jump in there and introduce themselves and kind of jump into the conversation, and welcome to those people, and you know who you are. It's been awesome to read a little bit about you guys and have you chatting in the group. So I think I'll start off with this lovely specimen right here because I'm really excited to talk about it. I took it to Guild this past week for show and tell, and it is Nora's cardigan, and it is finished. So before I jump into talking about this, I just wanted to mention, so I'm a big supporter of Guild. I think that guilds, particularly for weavers and spinners, are really important, partially because I love the library. There's always workshops that are ongoing that the guilds often coordinate and offer themselves. I'm on our workshop committee myself, so I sort of know about that firsthand. The other thing about guilds that is wonderful is the passing on of knowledge from very skilled crafters and makers to those of us who are still learning, and I think many of us view ourselves as lifelong learners. I came back to knitting after university because I really wanted to learn how to weave, and we have some close friends who live, they used to be close friends, who live up in Haida, which is off the coast of the northern coast of British Columbia. Those would know Haida. It used to be called the Queen Charlotte Islands, so that might ring a bell with some people who maybe don't recognize the name of Haida. The Haida Nation did reclaim their lands, and they were able to call the Queen Charlotte Islands their original name, which was Haida. So we went up when I was, the last time we were up was when I was in late high school. I would think I was in my grade 12 year, which here in Canada is your last year of high school. And that trip made a big impression on me and my brother, I think, actually, because where Richard and Laura live is this incredibly rural, very, the landscape up there is just unbelievably rough, and it's very stormy. Their house is coated with salt, and all the homes they look old and dilapidated, even though they're not. And it's from all of the salt that comes in off of the Pacific Ocean. And they live in a place called Sandspit. So anybody who knows sort of about Haida would know where Sandspit is. So it was quite an effort to get there, because you have to take the ferry across, which is an overnight ferry, to Queen Charlotte City, and then you take another ferry across to Sandspit. So, and I'll just call them family just to keep it simple. Our family that lives up there, they have a guiding business in a boat, and they were teachers and whatnot. And so we went out open water ocean fishing and brought back all of the, after we had filleted the fish and everything, we took the scraps out onto the beach. And of course the eagles, there's a huge feeding frenzy of the eagles. And like we had literally walked across the road and we're on this, and the fish fed. The reason why, or the eagles fed, the reason why I'm telling you all of this is because my Laura, it was a weaver. She had this floor loom, this big 52-inch, I suspect it was a 52-inch floor loom. And it just really made an impression on me. And they had weavings hanging on the wall, and that was sort of all I really remembered, but it really made this impression. And I think she was also doing some Salish weaving at the time as well, which is another Aboriginal First Nations style of weaving. I don't know a lot about weaving. I sort of always feel like I'm a bit of a bumbling idiot when I start talking about weaving because I have so much to learn. But at Guild on Tuesday night, our Guild president, who's a weaver, did a demonstration of warping a loom. And many in the Guild are experienced weavers. They have been weaving for many, 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 many years. Some of them have large floor looms. Some have small tabletop looms. Like there's all varieties. Some have upgraded. Some have multiple looms. Like we have a really strong weaving focus in our Guild. And so as a knitter turned spinner turned hopefully future weaver, I was just wrapped. And I thought that I wasn't going to be super interested. I don't want to do weaving right now. I was very happy to just go and be a part of the meeting, but not, partake. But I found it fascinating, and weaving just totally, I'm just fascinated with it. And I have been for a long, long time. And we haven't had room for me to sort of have a big loom, because that's what I really want to do eventually, is fabric to make clothing. And those who followed me for a while know how I feel about handmade wardrobe. And I've been sort of fiddling around with that a little bit over the last few years and sort of figuring out where I sit with all of that. So it's kind of got me thinking very seriously about, okay, like maybe I need to sort of start being a little bit more intentional about that. So it was really a great program, and it was really cool to see. And I'm going to be at Anwig on the Canada day-long weekend, which is at the beginning of July, and over in Victoria, British Columbia, which is on Vancouver Island. And Anwig is the annual North, what does it stand for? It's the Weavers Association of, anyways, it's just slipping my mind. But I'll be doing our Guild booth there and representing our booth, and I'm sure there will be some people from our Guild that'll come and volunteer with me. And it kind of has me thinking about sort of what maybe a couple of classes that I could take or workshops I could take while I'm there to maybe start to dabble in the weaving part. So it was really cool. But I also took Nora's sweater, and we had a massive meltdown before I left because she didn't want me to take her sweater to show and tell, because she thought that I was going to not bring it back. So she's very attached. She's refusing to wear it because she's worried that she's going to wreck it. So I'm having to sort of talk to her about, no, like it's okay. We've got enough yarn to make another one. If anything happens, it's okay. The yarn can be washed, blah, 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 blah. But she's 2.5. She's almost 3, and she doesn't really understand. So this is a very, very special sweater. The striped yoke is my hand spun. It's Savvy Skeins in the Ophelia colorway. I bought it about 5 years ago, and I chain plied it. It's some of my earliest hand spun when I came back to spinning the second time. And knitting with it was really interesting because the yarn was, I talked about this back when I did my niece's toque at Christmas time. It's a little bit ropey. It's a little bit overspun. It's very inconsistent. I didn't know anything about drafting zone or length of staple or consistency in your draft at that point. I was just playing around. But this isn't blocked yet. I haven't washed it. And the crazy thing is that once you knit with it, you can't tell. Like, there were some thin spots that I was a bit worried about, and I almost ripped it out and left it. But now that it's laid in the fabric for a few days and I've just very lightly steamed it, it's bloomed quite nicely and it's filled out, and like you can't tell that it's not super consistent. You'd have to really come up with a magnifying glass and really like look at it. And if anybody is that close to Nora's sweater and criticizing it that much, then I think they have the problem, not me. So this is the back. I used the Flax pullover pattern from Tin Can Knits. And you might be saying, yeah, but Rachel, this is a cardigan, not a pullover. The reason why I used it is because it has a size range instead of like 2T, 3T, 4T, 5T. T stands for toddler for those who have never knit for children. And I wanted a range size, somewhere between a 2T and a 4T, because Nora's growing quite a lot and she's wearing mostly 4T stuff, but it's too big on her, but she wants everything really loose because James is always going on and on about how he wants his things loose. He doesn't want anything tight, nothing restrictive. So I think she's kind of picked that up. And so I wanted the length of everything for the 4T size and measurement, but I wanted this sort of more the sizing for a 2T to make the cuffs a little bit tighter, the yoke a little bit tighter. But in the end, it is definitely a 4T when you measure the sizing. The chest circumference of the cardigan is about 24 inches around. So what I did with the pullover pattern is I took the stitch counts. My gauge matched perfectly. And I basically cast on the number of stitches that they tell you. It's a free pattern. It's Tin Can Knits on Ravelry, who are local designers to me. One of them is, although she's not living here anymore. Anyways, doesn't matter. So I cast on, placed my markers. I didn't do the garter stitch band down the arm. And then in the front, I cast on 6 less stitches, so 3 less on the one side of the cardigan and 3 less on the other side of the cardigan to compensate for that inch that the button band would take up in the front. And then I worked back and forth. So I followed the instructions for the number of raglan decreases, which fits her perfectly. I'm glad I didn't go any further, and separated for the sleeves. After that, I didn't look at the pattern because I can knit these things in my sleep. I just wanted the stitch counts to sort of get me started. And it turned out just perfectly. I had these buttons, these creamy buttons in my stash. They're old. They're a little bit too small. I'm going to run into my local button shop and see if I can find the next size up, because I was in there a couple months ago and they actually still had these because they noticed them. It's a little bit serendipitous. So I'm going to see if they have the next size up so that they don't pop out of the buttonholes, because the buttonholes did stretch a little bit. And then I worked three rows of stockinette at the bottom on the cuff and at the cuff on the sleeve, and then 1 by 1 rib at the for the cuffs and the bottom. So you'll remember last week I had shown the picot bind off at the bottom. In the end, it wasn't going to work. I just didn't like it. It was rolling really badly. That transition between stockinette and a border like that, it was going to bug me. This is Barocco Vintage, which is the white, the cream, the mochi. And it's got acrylic in it. It's 40% acrylic. No, it's 40% wool, 10% nylon, and then the remainder is acrylic. And it's not going to hold its block, and it's going to get worn. This thing's going to really live a full life on Nora's body when she starts wearing it and wants to wear it. And I just couldn't see how having to block and do all of that was really worthwhile. And then so I changed it to the 1 by 1 rib. I ripped it all out and did that. And then the only other thing that I did was sew on this really cute little button that I have in my stash from my bead making, and it just says handmade, and it's a little hand, and Nora wanted it sewn on, so I did that. I'll insert a photo at some point in the podcast, probably towards the end, with that so that you can see, because it's really super cute. So that turned out really beautifully. I love the gauge that I knit this at. I knit this on 4.5mm needles, so a little bit tighter than I normally would, but I think it's going to be a little bit harder wearing of a fabric. The hand spun base is merino, mulberry silk, and sparkle. And so unfortunately, and it's a lot of sparkle. So unfortunately, I really don't want to put this in the machine and machine wash it, even though I used Barocco Vintage for the body. So I think what I'm going to do is probably I'll hand wash it and use like Tide to Go and that kind of stuff on it. So it's going to there's going to be some abrasion over time. I'll try and avoid it getting dirty, but hello, toddlers. So I knitted at a slightly tighter gauge to hopefully increase the longevity of this cardigan. I don't think I have enough yarn to knit another sweater with quite so much striping in it, but I did put the rest of it. I was going to use the rest of the yarn to knit a matching toque that like the one that I did for my niece for Christmas for Nora, but I'm actually going to put the yarn away. I put the rest of the Barocco Vintage skein. I used 1.25 skeins of Barocco Vintage, so I put the rest of it away. It's in a Ziploc bag together. I put them in my stash. So if and when Nora wears this out, I will be able to make her another one. Probably just won't have the degree of striping. Like the stripes may only be in the yoke, or I maybe would only be able to do half because I'd be doing a bigger size too. So it maybe would only be a few stripes up here, or maybe it would just be until I ran out kind of thing. So I am going to save it in my stash just in case we need to knit another one. So that is this Flax pullover cardiganized by Tin Can Knits. All right, I have a finished skein. This is Kinfolk Yarn and Fiber. She's a local to me dyer. It's all finished. It's a 2-ply. It's Corriedale. There's really not a whole lot to say about it. I showed you last week my progress and the bobbin and everything. I ended up getting 168 yards of worsted weight yarn. I ended up actually really liking these colors. It's the Mardi Gras colorway. There's some yellow in there. There's some areas where the yarn, because of how I only stripped the fiber 6 times, and then I spun 3 nests to each bobbin. And the cool thing about this is there's some areas where the colors drafted together and almost like combo drafted. So there's some really beautiful parts of the yarn that are heathered. And then when they plied, they're just really, really beautiful. So Nora asked for a green and purple sweater, and if you were watching last week, you remember me talking about that, which was the impetus for knitting this. And I was gonna save all of my bin spins this year and put them into the guild sale in the fall. It's a big fundraiser that we do for our guild once a year. But now I'm kind of thinking I might spin the other one the exact same way and knit another sweater for Nora. The problem with that is it's 100% Corriedale. It'll wear really beautifully, but it'll be hard to get it clean. So I'm going to hang on to the yarn. I'm going to spin the other one exactly the same way. I'm going to see how this wears and then decide if I need to stick to my guns and make sure that it can be machine washable, or if I think that she's getting to a point where she could cope with having a sweater that's 100% wool that can't go in the washing machine. We have dogs, and you know, it's the little things. Like we go out for a walk with the dogs. Yes, she's got her jacket on, but now we've come home, we've taken the jacket off and hung it up on the coat rack, and now Charlotte's wet from being outside. That's my dog. And she brushes past Nora, and now there's mud all along the side of the sweater, and it happens all the time. So do I want to make myself crazy with trying to run after the kids and run after the dog for the sweater? So I'm just going to see how it goes and how this goes. But I really love the purple and the green in this. And like I said last show, purple and green are not my favorite combination. But I think the blue and the yellow in this, it just makes it work. It's very pleasing to the eye. The 2-ply came up really, really lovely and consistent. It's got a nice hand to it. And it's just a really, I'm just really happy with how this yarn came out. It's got a nice drape and a nice hand. It's not coarse. It's not overspun. It's got a lovely lightness to it and a lovely airiness. So the way that I accomplish that is a technique that I've been using quite a bit lately. I spun my singles on, I think 8-to-1 or 6-to-1. And I didn't put much twist into the singles. And I drafted 2 drafts. So I did short backward drafts. So I pinched, pulled back, pinch, pulled back for every 1 revolution of my drive wheel. So it was 8-to-1 because it put 4 twists per inch into my yarn, because 1 revolution of the drive wheel puts 8 twists into your yarn, but I drafted twice for every 1 revolution. So it puts about 4 twists per inch into the yarn. So it's almost like you've got a soft spun singles. I could have left it as a singles yarn and fold it. But then I let it rest on the bobbin, which I don't usually let rest, but because there's just not that much twist, I don't want it to drift apart as I'm plying. So I let the bobbins rest overnight, and then I went upstairs and I used my matchless, and because I love my matchless with the higher ratios when I'm plying. I really love plying on my matchless. I stuck it at 15-1, or maybe I used 18-1, and I plied it on that to get that really tight twist angle and that quick. You just can ply faster when you use a higher ratio. Like you just get that twist in there that you want. And I plied each length of yarn. I think I needed like 4 treadles per length of yarn that I was plying. So I would, ply 4 treadles, feed it in, ply 4 treadles, feed it in. And on the 4th treadle, I would feed in. So that's how I made sure that it was just 4 per each length of yarn. So 1, 2, 3, feed in, 1, 2, 3, feed in. So that 4th treadle, you're putting it in. And it gave me this really lovely twist angle that's about 45, 50 degrees. But it preserves that bounciness and that airiness in the yarn because of those soft spun singles. So when I went to wash it, it bloomed, and I started with a DK weight before it went into the wash, but I finished with a worsted because those soft spun singles bloomed, but you've got this nice ply twist to tighten it up. And that's how I preserved that nice hand of the yarn. I love that technique. It's my favorite way to spin BFL. This is Corriedale. It's like BFL. It's longer stapled. We tend to put too much twist in these longer stapled yarns. They just don't need all of that ply twist because their crimp structure is different. And I just really like it. So give it a shot if that is something that if you find your BFL and your Corriedale end up really ropey. Decrease your drive ratio to a much, much lower ratio. Spin up some soft spun singles and then ply at a higher ratio and see if you like your results. And just do a sample. You don't have to commit to the whole 4 ounces, but just see what you think. So that is that. And that was dyed by Kylan of Kim Folk Yarn and Fiber. And she's local to me. And go have a look in her Etsy shop because her colors are amazing. I can never get away from her booth when I see her locally without buying something. The last thing that I wanted to talk about today was color studies. So for those who have been following along in the group, you'll know what I'm talking about. I am still working my way through summer, the colorway summer. I'm halfway through spinning these, and I'm just going to give you a bit of a teaser this week because I don't want to share what's on my bobbin yet until I can take some photos and finish up the yarn. So I don't have a finished skein for you today. My goal has been to show you a finished skein every week of sort of as I'm working my way through my color studies, but this isn't quite done because I'm recording a little bit early this week because I've got something on the calendar. I'm working actually is what's going on. So I'm just recording a little bit a day early, so I didn't get it quite done. But what I did, I took about 25 grams of the braid, and I stripped it down, and then I pulled it apart by staple length as well after stripping it down vertically. And then I took all sorts of bits and bobs and things out of my fiber stash, yellows and pinks, and you saw the teaser last week on the podcast. If you watched last week, while I gave you a teaser of Woolen Spinning Radio, there was a photo thread of prepping this spin, and I mixed in the summer colorway with it, and I've been spinning it up. So next week you'll see what that yarn looks like. And I put some sari silk in there. I put some pulled sari silk, tons of sparkle. Yeah, it's creating a really heathered, lovely yarn. And I'm actually going to use this yarn in particular for my crocheted sunny spread blanket that I'm doing. So I'll show you an update of that blanket next week because I've been working my way through my suns. That's what I'm calling them because they look like suns. And I'm excited to see how this yarn crochets up. So more on that next week, and I'm hoping to show you the finished yarn next week. So yeah, I just wanted to do something totally different. One of my absolute most favorite techniques for spinning is actually to take a braid of fiber and card it up on my drum carder and add a whole bunch of other stuff and other colors and texture and all that kind of stuff. And I tend to spin it short backward draw because it is one of my favorite drafts, and I can default into sort of my autopilot spinning. So that is what I'm doing. So I'll have more on that next week. Thank you so much for joining me this week. I hope you have a wonderful fiber-filled weekend. I will be at work, but I will be thinking of you all, and on my breaks I will be knitting away. So I hope that you are well, and I will chat with you next week. Bye everyone.